Alright, I want to buy some statues, man. I got the itch. Let me go on Facebook. That's a good place to look. Let's see here. This guy right here. Need help. I know I shouldn't have, but I sent $2,000 via PayPal friends and family to the person below, and they've been asking for tracking for 3 weeks. Now they blocked them. That's why you never do friends and family, man. That sucks for that guy. Everyone knows that. I mean, yeah, look at the comments. I'm so sorry you got scammed. There are just some total dicks out there. Never ever pay friends and family. There's some real douches out there for sure. Never trust anyone who only take unprotected payments. That's a good point. Let's buy some statues here, though. Okay, here's Bane. I've kind of always wanted this piece. You can get it. This guy's asking way too much. It's still available at $9.99. And look at that. Only takes friends and family or Zelle. Only on. Wait a minute. Isn't this the same profile? What the fuck? As the Extreme channel is pushing towards 50,000 subscribers, these are just a few of the statues we're giving away on the journey there. If you want to know how to win one, stay tuned for later in the video. Thanks for tuning in to the Art of the Scam 101. That's right, today we're going to talk about how to scam statue collectors. The reason why I think it's important to know how scams work is so that you can protect yourself. And while I blocked out the names on that recent post, I see that all the time. And while I will certainly have my opinion, I would never dictate what someone else should or shouldn't do. I mean, I like to run naked down my streets with jello shots at midnight. Some people disagree with that, but I'm all for it. But in the last 6 months, scamming in the statue community has been on the rise like I've never seen before. And we're not going to talk about the factors that are leading up to it. Some could be economic, some could be the surge of all the new people in the hobby. But the fact is that most high-end statues probably average over $1,000 each. So while they're not investments, they are very large purchases that for the most part are almost always made online. So today specifically, I'm going to give you what I've experienced and my opinions when purchasing a statue online. Now I want to be very specific. I'm not talking about companies that are publicly traded or really well known. So I'm not talking about Queen Studios or Sideshow or anything like that. This is more about one-on-one transactions, whether they happen via YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or name your poison. Because as you saw in the intro, I see so many people pay via an unprotected method, and we're going to talk about that, and they get scammed and lose thousands of dollars. And most people in the community would agree you should never ever pay via unprotected. But another thing that I've seen lately is a lot of statue collectors are only offering to sell via unprotected payments. Like I said, they're free to do what they want, but today I'm going to kind of give you some advice on what I would do and some things to look out for, both about scamming a buyer and scamming a seller. So first thing we're going to talk about is if the buyer is a scammer, because that is the less common. It's probably at the very most a 20 or 40 to 1 ratio when it comes to all the different scams. Now I know what you're thinking, well, Mr. X, how could a buyer be a scammer? That's what we're going to talk about, and honestly, that's a big reason that so many people only want to sell via unprotected payment methods. But before we dive into any of that, I think it's important to talk about the different payment methods when you're trying to sell a statue with somebody you connect with online. The first and most obvious is sexual favors or candy. I highly encourage that as long as you use protection. Second is in real life transactions and cold hard cash. Now for both buying and selling, just make sure you meet in a public place and be very careful about what information you give out. I've probably done about 50 plus transactions in real life where I met up with somebody. The more public, the better, because someone will have a lot of cash on them and a very valuable statue. The third method, which I don't use too often because my bank fucking hates it, is Wise or TransferWise. This is more so when you're doing an international transaction. And I'm not going to talk about that today because unfortunately, since I rarely use it, I don't have enough knowledge. But I'm going to talk about Zelle. So Zelle is essentially an app that does bank-to-bank transfers. When you pay via Zelle, there's absolutely no protection for the buyer or the seller. So if you send somebody money via Zelle, you're just going to pray to God they do the right thing. Next, gaining a lot of popularity is Venmo. Venmo is very similar to PayPal, which is the last one we're going to cover. And now Venmo actually offers protection fees. And just like PayPal, it costs a little bit extra, but Venmo will essentially insure your purchase. And then lastly, of course, we have PayPal, and there's two methods for PayPal. One is friends and family. Now, this is not meant to do a transaction. It's actually against PayPal's rules, and I never do it. Because this is more like if you went to dinner with someone and you split a bill and you needed to pay them back. If you're sending money to friends or family for whatever reason, it is not meant as a transaction. And I'm gonna let you know, I've had my PayPal account frozen many, many times. And there's been horror stories of people losing tens of thousands of dollars because either A, they were misusing it, or maybe they weren't even, but something was suspicious, making PayPal think they were misusing it. So when it comes to transactions, I'm gonna tell you right now, you should never ever use PayPal friends and family. I've done it in the past, but I don't do it anymore. And we're gonna talk more about that. Then of course the other one is PayPal goods and services. This, you're charged an extra fee, and it depends on what countries the participants are in, the transaction fees, but they're usually around 3 to 5%. So of course this has to be paid, and generally a seller will want the buyer to pay that. So it's kind of like paying for insurance that if the seller doesn't actually send you the product or sends a broken product, and we're going to talk all about that, you have some type of legal recourse. So now very quickly, how do buyers scam sellers? Well, the most notorious way is if a legitimate seller sends a statue to a buyer, and the buyer can do a number of things. They can claim that the wrong thing arrived. They can claim that it arrived broken. Maybe it did arrive broken. Maybe it didn't. Nobody really knows. And then they can put pressure on the seller, especially if they use one of those protected payment methods, which is what is recommended, that the seller has to do something. Now, most of the time in these transactions, most people aren't scammers, so the buyer and seller will come to some type of arrangement. But some buyers will not back down. They want ridiculous compensation. Now, as a seller, I've sold hundreds of statues, and I've experienced that a few times as well. Thankfully, I'm very blessed with resources, so I can tell the person, fuck you, you're getting nothing, even if I have to lose everything. Now, clearly that's not the ideal situation. But as a seller, the best way to protect yourself from a buyer is to take as many pictures as you can and get some type of insurance. While I wouldn't recommend insurance from places like UPS, because I've raised 6 claims in my life and every single one has been denied. However, I do know other people have had success. You can actually get insurance policies for your collection that covers shipping as well. Or you just have to be prepared to lose money. But it's pretty rare you run into a buyer scammer. However, they are definitely out there, and the ones that I've had to deal with in the past, I just have a note to never sell to again. But today is more about how does the seller scam the buyer. So I'm going to talk to you about a few signs to watch out for. If any of these signs are happening, in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, you shouldn't do the transaction. Worst case scenario, you don't have to spend a lot of money, even if it was going to be a legitimate deal. But the number one thing I look for is if they only accept unprotected payment methods. As I said, for every scam that happens, probably 50 times it's the seller and 1 time it's the buyer. So if that seller feels they need to protect themselves by only taking unprotected payment methods, that's fine. However, maybe that transaction isn't for you. Now, I've heard all stories, well, Mr. X, you just get references for that seller, and then that'll take care of it. No, it won't. Because a few things may happen. Maybe they're just going to get a bunch of friends to vouch for them. Or you know what? Maybe they are a legitimate person, so they will have tons of people vouch for them. But shit happens. If somebody hurt my daughter today, I would be in jail tomorrow. And if you'd bought a statue from me, I wouldn't be able to get it shipped out, despite the fact that I've sold 200-300 statues with no issues. Maybe 50 people vouch for this person, and then tomorrow the IRS sends them a $50,000 bill. Because they thought that if they bought a statue from Prime One or another distributor and didn't pay tax, that they are scot-free and have no responsibility to claim that for tax at the end of the year. Maybe they're a good person and their business went under. Believe it or not, I've vouched for about 4 people in my life that turned out to be horrible people. So just because you can get references does not mean that person is solid. However, references are still a good thing to get. So that's my first piece of advice. No matter what, never buy something in an unprotected payment method. You'll notice when I do my for sale videos, I offer that as an option. But when I do PayPal, since it's PayPal's rules, you have to use goods and services, which protects the buyer. Number 2 thing I'm going to tell you. So I've been scammed as a buyer by commissioners and different things, and every single time, communication was the number 1 red flag. Their communication was horrible. So you're talking to somebody online. Now, they may not respond right away, and that's fine. Some of us have lives. But if days go by and then they tell you they're going to follow up and then you never hear anything, that is a huge red flag. If you're always having to track them down, huge red flag. Like I said, if they don't respond right away or in a few hours, that's not a red flag. Maybe they're busy. But kind of in my mind, if somebody can't reply in a day or so and they don't give you a heads up that they're going to be unavailable, and you see this reoccurring during the transaction, bad communication is a huge sign. You should rarely have to follow up with someone, especially if you're giving them money. Number 3 sign, and this is more on Instagram or Facebook, if their profile is newer, that is a huge red flag. I won't even do a transaction with someone whose profile is less than 6 months old under any circumstances. Yes, I may miss out on a statue, but I will get over it. Scammers often create new profiles because eventually they do get caught and their profile gets called out. Another red flag for me is when they say that they are not responsible if anything breaks. While I do get this as a seller because about 5% of the stuff I sell breaks, and when you think I've sold hundreds of statues, it ends up being a lot. That's a red flag to me. How do we know it wasn't already broken? I've done about 3 transactions in my life where the seller said that and I still bought it every single time it was broken when it arrived. That is another red flag. If upfront the seller takes no responsibility for anything that'll break. And probably, guys, the easiest one, if something doesn't feel right, walk away. You know it. You have that gut feeling in your stomach. Maybe it's a combination of the ones I just talked about. Maybe it's 1 or 2 of those, or something just looks off. Walk away 100%. Now, there are a lot of other ways to protect yourself, like getting them to take pictures with the statue and the date and things of that nature, but I didn't want this to be all-inclusive. I wanted you guys to comment. Throw down in the comments below things you should have done when you got scammed or things you have done to prevent yourself from being scammed. But again, my biggest thing I can tell you guys, always use protected payment. I would 100% recommend that every time. And again, some people who sell and they refuse to do protected payments, that doesn't mean they are a scammer. I want to emphasize that. I just wouldn't buy from them. And I wouldn't recommend others to for those reasons. But again, please throw your comments below because not only will it start a good conversation for everyone to kind of feed off of, but you could win a statue with that. We will be giving all of these statues away plus additional ones at every 5,000 subscriber milestone. To win one of these statues, all you have to do is make sure you've liked this video, you've subscribed to the channel, you've hit that bell notification, and then just drop a comment below. Every 5,000 subscriber milestone, we are going to do a random drawing and pick a random comment and give one of these statues away, plus some additional ones I'm not showing right now. The more videos you comment on, the higher your chances are to win. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. A different kind of video. If this video pissed you off, go cry to your mom. You'll be fine. But again, these are just my opinions. I appreciate your support. Make sure to subscribe if you like stuff like this. Talk to you soon. Take care.